happening, everybody? This is Blair Johnson welcoming you back in for another episode of Badass Records Podcast. Doing a solo gig today. If you missed the first two times I did episodes of that ilk, check out episodes 82 and 87, in which I chat briefly about Medeski Martin Wood's Shackman and Benevento Russo duo's Play Pause Stop. Got a 5 spot for you this time. Instagram and Twitter are the socials in which you can keep up with the podcast. Episodes are typically out Thursdays on YouTube, audio where you stream. BadassRecordsPodcast.com is the website, and BadassRecordsPodcast@gmail.com is how to get in touch with me if your heart's burning to join me at the table for a conversation about you and some of the music you dig. That's all I got shaking for you this week. Appreciate you stopping by. Hope you enjoyed the show. What's happening? This is Blair Johnson with the Badass Records Podcast, and I'm hollering at you from the onset of episode number 166. Normally, I'm talking to someone else, and the purpose of that is to get their story or stories. I've done solo episodes twice before, numbers 82 and 87. In the first one, I talked about Medeski Martin Wood's Shackman. In the other, it was Benevento Russo duo's Play Pause Stop. So those are out there to check out if you'd like. But what's cooler than listening to me read some shit that I've typed up is talking to other folks. So BadassRecordsPodcast@gmail.com is how you can holler at me if you're in the Casey area or gonna be and want to do one of these. So hit your boy up. Anyway, I do this for 5 primary reasons. Number 1, talking to people in person feels important to me. Number 2, listening to folks talk about them and themselves and their stories is valuable to both me and them, I think. So that's 2. 3, I've always loved music. 4, this is a way for me to be productive with my time as opposed to just consuming content too often. And 5, it helps me fill my week when my kids aren't here. So that's the 5-legged stool, if you will. Shouts out to Russell Banks regarding the why of doing this. So Kyle Maggard of Brothers Music, episode number 155. You should totally check it out. He was the first guest to ask me, if memory serves, what my top 5 would be. And I told him I had a rough draft of it and showed it to him on his way out. It's got a couple dozen albums on it. I haven't ever entertained the notion of trimming it down like I asked my guests to do. But anyway, I poached a few from that list for the purposes of this episode, and those are these. Number 1, Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti. 1975, 6th of 9 for them. 4 sides, 15 tracks, 83 minutes. It's the double album of double albums. So the story is... John Brick had this one on his list for episode number 56. And ironically, Brick and Chris Luck performed a cover of a Zepp tune in our 8th grade communications class as part of a skit. It was my non-FM radio introduction to the band. My actual album collection began with a fascinating gift from my dad. My folks had already separated, and one day, whether on a custody exchange or just a random stop by, My father appeared in the family room of our Russell Street home and presented me with vinyl copies of Barry Manilow's One Voice and Rupert Holmes's The Stranger. I was probably around 5 or 6, and now 45 years later, that memory obviously has stuck with me. I wouldn't appreciate those records immediately, but once the surprise and the confusion wore off, I grew to dig them, or at least portions of their content. And a deeper piece of that exchange wouldn't resonate beyond my subconscious for years, and that was this. Music was important on some level to my dad. And that delayed realization was in spite of the fact that he had an actively accessed precursor to the case logic in the form of a sort of hard leather mini briefcase full of 8 tracks in his van. What has always stood out were the various John Denver albums, a few Oak Ridge Boys releases, the soundtrack to the Muppet movie, and a Sesame Street collection called 10th Anniversary Album. So, after seeing the Brick Luck skit, I, on my next available opportunity, borrowed my stepmom's 3-speed bike while staying the weekend at my dad's. And I biked to Ward Parkway Mall. And with my own money, I purchased Led Zeppelin 4 and Billy Joel's Innocent Man, making them officially the 3rd and 4th albums in my collection. From there, it was a lot of oldies, AM radio in my mom's car. That eventually spilled into a long relationship with classic rock radio, a lot of which would be the seeds and the water for the growth of my album collection. I eventually picked up Zeppelin's 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, got House of the Holy, and somewhere in the mix, this one. And I don't want to be hyperbolic or misquote a page from my own memories, but to the best of my ability, I feel like the way to describe the listening experience of physical graffiti was to say that it transported me to a time of olden day battles and campfire faces hardened by both long sunny days and nights of little sleep, of loss and rage, mysticism and smiles, passion and grief. I not only love this record, but I truly covet the fact that it has stayed with me on a high emotional level for decades of my life. Pound for pound, I can't say that there's ever been anything better when it comes to rock and roll at 83-minute intervals. As far as cuts go, I could wax poetic about most of them. In this moment's notes are these. A, I simply do not know a way in which you open the badassest double rock album of all time without the blunt crispness and the production of Custard Pie. So many great pieces to that track, and it's, as far as simplicity goes, it's one of the simpler tunes on the track, but on the record, but it just shreds. You got JPJ coming in with that low, so good. My track selection samples will likely feature a lot of opening seconds, which is not meant to detract from later portions of any of these songs. I do happen to believe, however, in hooks, in some sense, anyway. That said, the way that In My Time of Dying starts is a lovely example of how a track can morph and grow and challenge then traditional songwriting. Robert Plant eventually goes almost tribal with some of his vocal work, while John Bonham just beats the living tar out of his kit. It's epic stuff. C, before I gush about In the Light, I must first overlook it for the track that follows it. In the cheesy sense of songs that were written and recorded specifically for you, the listener, track number 8 on this album, called Bronnier Hour, was 1000% without question written for me. It served for many years as my recharge, my source of connection to the earth. It's brilliant in its brevity and everlasting with its ingenuity. In the Light, however, sets that transportation in motion and readies the stage for the wonderful 2 minutes 6 seconds that will follow it. Magnificence in every musicianship and production sense. D, Down by the Seaside, is one of many examples on which I could lay my foundation for John Paul Jones as the Silent Zepp MVP. Sure, the sex appeal and wailing pipes of Plant, the virtuosity of Jimmy Page, the bananas still mostly untouched, veracity of Bonzo at the kit. These things are well known and well documented. I just don't envision this quartet as any more relevant than, say, a Creedence Clearwater Revival without Jones, though. He was a multi-instrumentalist. He was a vibe factory. He was irreplaceable. To this day, one of the coolest things I've ever witnessed was Katie Busenbark playing the synth solo to All of My Love in high school. All My Love, that is. I'm sure chapters and biographies have been penned about his immeasurable value. I just haven't come across them yet. E, this one's a tie. You can't talk about this record without a dissertation on the enormousness of 10 Years Gone. You just can't. It's one of the greatest rock and roll songs of all time. And believe me when I say there are tons of super great all-time rock songs. They just didn't know you could do what Led Zeppelin did in this song until Led Zeppelin did it. It's the mold-breaking recipe that perfectly measured all the ingredients and executed without flaw. That said, 2 tracks later came Boogie with Stu, which held special meaning for me and my crew, but also, and again, Jones. This time with the ragtime tickling and Plant with the sharp yet carefree crooning, if you will. Undeniable duo. That brings me to number 2. Fish's Junta. 1 of 16 for them. 84-ish minutes, 10 tracks, and those are important distinctions because fuck Union Federal, fuck Sanity, and fuck Iculus. For the purposes of this studio release, this album starts with Fee and closes with Contact, and anyone who says otherwise is a fucking pagan and a terrorist. Always got to give love to Mr. Pollock for his long-standing artwork, album artwork, poster artwork, portion of his awesomeness you want to address. Anyway, skipping school one day, as I blow up my mic, senior year, Chris Fickle popped in a 93 bootleg of a Fish show. I think the first thing I heard was Sparkle. Maybe Maze was nearby in the set list, as Rift was obviously a fresh release for them at that point. So I bought that record, and my life was forever changed. I can't say for certain that Junta was my next Fish purchase, but whenever it was that I came to own that cassette, I didn't get it at first. I knew that the lead-off track was somewhat beloved, but aside from that, there were parts that wowed me. I for sure grew quickly to adore You Enjoy Myself, The Divided Sky, and David Bowie, but I wouldn't move the tassel of my love for those tunes until the wee morning hours on the third leg of an LSD-infused evening in Pittsburgh, Kansas. In short, I got fully beneath my covers with my Walkman and placed those tracks on repeat, draining precious batteries with my redundant fast-forward action, while Brian, my third and final roommate in my lone year in the Pitt State dorms, slept. As many do, Brian was spending a portion of that year of his life trying to find himself. He worked at McDonald's and often dressed in a crib-adjacent wardrobe of blue, ultimately penning an English class essay entitled A Filly in Detroit, upon learning about my persuasive article on why everyone should take mushrooms. Our beds formed an L along the same wall, his parallel, mine perpendicular, meaning his feet were less than 10 feet away from me while I ran those tracks back over and over again. And I couldn't help be aware of the irony of him wanting to convey a drug persona while I was literally living one. I say all of that to say this: most impressive 1980s rock album made, without question. The Fish from Vermont, man. They slapped me in the face over 30 years ago, literally turning rock music on its head in my mind's eye, and they've never stopped impressing me. I've often thought and occasionally said that each of those first 5 Fish albums possess very unique identities that I have come to associate with not only the content of each record, but the band's intent in making them, and perhaps even stronger, the color association. Red for Hoist, the blue of Rift, Nectar's orange, all that luscious green grass on Lawn Boy, and of course the white of Junta. And this is anything but a knock on post-1994 Fish albums. Those first 5, though, they're hardwired. And if I had to pick one that floored me more than any, it's Junta. Today, anyway. For cuts, I'm not going to not lead off with track number 2. Hey, you enjoy myself. The most beautiful piece of rock music ever recorded. Rush's La Via Strangiato for a close second place in my mind, maybe even tied. B. At the 1:59 mark of Golgi Apparatus, we get the now epic scene from the Todd Phillips documentary, Bittersweet Motel. This was already a monumental moment in both the tracks and the album's lore, but this cemented it as an iconic musical backdrop. It's so beautiful and lends well to the song's ultimate crescendo. It's always wild to discover such greatness in a track you overlooked for so many years. C. And if I overlooked Golgi for a chunk, I basically despised foam. Without question, the biggest don't get it inclusion on the record. Until one day, I simply got it. And that it is the payoff of the tension and release ratio. Foam is deplorable sonically for most of its 6 minutes and 50 seconds, at least until you're able to view without bias the whole story that the tune's telling. And that's this. Most things that slog and are shitty have beautifully transcendent moments. It's up to you to decide which of those you'll cherish and or dwell on. The payoff in Foam is childlike, ethereal, and packed with uplift. Then it closes with Silly. One of the wilder rides ever put on studio tape, and I love it. D. I'm sticking with the overlooked here and awarding Dinner and a Movie some flowers, and it's that 254-ish to 305-ish window for which I'm doing so. Yes, tension and release again, and you didn't really realize how bad you needed it until it hit you.
Let's go out to dinner and see a movie. Let's go out to dinner and see a movie.
Incredible writing and musicianship, and it still joys me today. In the weird world of being single, how they distilled this peculiar piece of courtship within the constructs of such a wild tune. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the band's COVID efforts that earned the same title as the track. E. I've never been a huge Divided Sky guy, but this is the chains off B-side, in my mind, of the You Enjoy Myself single that was never released. The guitar playing of Trey Anastasio in this now 36-year-old release remains unmatched elsewhere in American rock history. Now, I'm not talking about Zappas and Vais and Satrianis. I'm talking bands. And equal credit is due to John Fishman, Mike Gordon, and Paige McConnell for their parts in not only this outfit, but the way in which they came together to put this down on tape. It will be studied in the future. It's that bonkers. 3. De La Soul's Stakes is High. 1996, 4th of 9, 17 songs, 68 minutes. I'm still in college. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 years have passed. I'm in a different town, in a different state, living a similar but different student life. While my hippiness was met with some level of stun in southern Kansas, it was quasi-embraced in southern Colorado. And while my stay in Durango didn't always come with housing/roommate stability, I was supremely blessed to cross paths with Steve Rathje, who somehow managed to agree to live with me and tolerate my existence under his same roof for somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 years. I'm not sure I'll ever be able to aptly describe my gratitude for this relationship. Steve was a dude that listened to his older brother's suggestion that he come out to Colorado from Philadelphia. He was done with school, a smart dude, a painter, an artist. He's still very much alive, and we can occasionally text. It just works for this narrative to use the past tense. Anyway, Steve's living life, trying to make ends meet. I'm a dumb college kid trying to figure shit out. We wind up living together, and we shared a lot of shit. Groceries, beer, weed, chores, hours spent playing NHL 99 on PlayStation, and, above all, music. Steve bought CDs, I bought cassettes. Steve bought the first Iowa home stereo system I'd ever seen. I think it was a 3-disc changer, dual cassette, super bass speaker system, small but very effective. And when it came to buying music, we splurged, oftentimes irresponsibly on my end. So we went down jazz, hip-hop, and Zappa rabbit holes. We, or I, tinkered with acid jazz, rap, and sundry other genres. Somewhere in the mix I bought a cassette copy of Stakes is High, and it hit me hard. It's come up in previous conversations, i.e. my De La /Tribe discographies episode number 61 with Elwyn M. Grimes Jr., or my chat with Meg Cumin, episode 90. But it bears repeating that I think it's as close to a perfect hip-hop record as will ever be made. And please know that I'm far from any sort of hip-hop scholar. I'm just saying it has always scratched my itches in all the right ways. Hip-hop filled a void for me that I didn't know I had. It took the cleverness of rap, the cool of the then newly quasi-visible persona, and the appreciation of previous artists via sampling. And it put together a lovely package. I loved Tribe. I loved Diggable. But De La really did it for me. Perhaps an unpopular opinion, but I liked the clarity and the quality of the production. I liked the cleverness. I liked the way in which they rhymed in metaphor, if you will. And I'd be remiss without saying, hey, De La, I'm still waiting on that AOI 3, some DJ shit. I love every song on this record, but I gotta start with track number 6, Din and It, as it really took that summertime vibe from DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince and put it down with music instead of simply stating what it was. And that's just ground level shit, a layer upon which they built. And then it spoke. It said, let's come together, people. Let's be cool. Let's have some fun. And maybe even swap a little spit, as Joey Diaz says. It talked about life, how to enjoy it even in the face of a challenge. And for that, it deserves a million accolades. B. Breaks. Let's not overlook the incredible story in this song that really captures life and the human struggle. You can't speak to this tune's validity, though, if you don't start with the celebratory fashion with which it starts. This is one of the greatest songs in American music history. The Curtis Blow shout-out should go without mention, but the scratches, so delicately, perfectly placed, deserve kudos. And really, only a fool's fool could mindlessly overlook the emceeing on display in this cut. Now to that quintessential verse that embodies strife. Lyrically, they speak to real-life scenarios in which existence truly does smack you in the mouth while you're simply trying to get by and do your thing. And it almost champions them with the message of, hey, this shit's going to go down. You're not going to like it, and you're certainly not going to expect it, but this is how it goes. And it's up to you to find a way to enjoy the other elements, like some tunes while you handle your responsibilities. Some fear being a part of every day walking around the world. People you trust letting you down. And the sometimes unimaginable consequences of that intoxicating notion we know as passion. No matter where you're from, it's for you and yours. C, track number 10, Long Island Degrees, gets a nod here for the way in which it punched me in the teeth for the first time I heard it. And that's because of the way it closes. Mind you, this is side A's final track, and I'm listening on cassette. So you hear this particular sequence of words. The cut wraps, the hiss evaporates, and then that tape player pops with the ending stop. And you have to pull yourself out of this frozen, real-world reality to get up and flip the tape over. this is and was really powerful stuff in so much as a little topic we call racism goes.
Rap, it sucks. I hate it. It just don't appeal to me. There's no music in it. It's just, niggers talking.
I personally have not navigated this life without venom, hatred, bias, and yes, even racism. I wasn't raised with these things. It's just how the world around me felt and the people in it lived. Meaning, I wasn't exposed to a lot of diversity. Society all but said the crime and the whatnots happening over there in that community. And sometimes behavior reflected that. But I almost never came across humans that walked around speaking these things or pressuring me to feel them too. In short, I never really experienced a ton of just negative existence. I guess another way of putting it would be living in a bubble. The suburbs, whatever you want to call it. So I don't know if this particular clip that closes side A was staged or captured in real life, but it stings bad. It's an emblem, imagined or true, that some people are raised with prejudice or hatred or racism or whatever you want to call it, and its existence in their world feels intentional or generational, and that's super sad. D. Down syndrome is track number 15 on the record, and it just freaking slaps. It's not specialer than any other on the album, but it's got an element of flow that's worth noting. It opens up with a quiet intensity, builds, and doesn't stop. In all 3 of its minutes, to pause from stellar delivery. E. Now, if I dedicated enough time and energy to this portion of this piece of the episode, I could make a case for most any track on the record. I'm going to give some love, though, to this one solely for its immaculate closer vibes. It's rare when the music-loving world gets handed a virtually flawless recording, and I consider this album to be of that ilk. But most times you have to check all the boxes in order to be considered in the running. De La definitely did so here with Sunshine. It's a delightful send-off, and that's really all that needs to be said about it. It's like one of those movies that moves you so much that when it cuts to credits, you're either frozen for a moment or you go, wow. Perhaps it's both of those things. Again, I'm in college, 22-ish, far from home. I'm out here trying to follow the life map with a questionable compass. There are indicators that I'm doing it right, while plenty exist to argue otherwise. My parents, through no fault of their own, are too busy living their own lives to understand the loneliness and the unsurety. They're also doing their best, but things feel very solitary. This record helped ground me with the world in a way that my own experiences couldn't. It made me feel like I understood life in a way that parenting and textbooks could never do. And for that, I'll always have huge De La love in my heart. 4. Mark Farina's Mushroom Jazz. I don't own this one on vinyl, so printout of the album cover artwork is all I got. But this is 1997, 12 tracks, 71 minutes, the initial installment in what would become an 8-part series that all sort of gets clumped together in terms of discography. If you break it up, though, his catalog contains 20 full-length releases that were preceded by an EP. The Mushroom Jazz series is now over a quarter-century old, and for my money, it's the birthplace of modern-day vibe. I discovered Farina via a dubbed cassette tape that wasn't mine. If you've ever logged any pre-digital age hours in a restaurant kitchen, you may know the scene. There's a wall-mounted shelf or some prep table space, perhaps a microwave top, and someone has had the foresight and the generosity to donate a boombox. and eventually every prep cook and line cook gets his or her turn to be DJ. This particular setting was Steamworks Brewing Company in Durango. I heard some farina and had to have mushroom jazz.
That happens.
Steve and I never looked back. Several an evening, we would be nice and irie with a couple of cold ones in hand, and the typical Blues Flyers best of 3 series loaded with the sound down, the mushroom jazz up. We would, on rare occasion, stand on our respective pieces of furniture and do our own little white boy shuffle to the mushroom jazz beats. A lot of Beavis and Butthead hip thrusts and air booty slaps if you're trying to imagine this picturesque scene. And we just kept buying those releases as they came out. Seldom, if ever, were we disappointed. Mostly because the tunes were always fresh and the album drops always a pleasant surprise. So many good memories from that first record of the series, though. Love Mark Farina. 5. Waking on a Pretty Days, Deluxe Days, Post Haze. 2013, Kurt Vile, 5th of 9, 18 tracks, 98 minutes. Initially, the bulk of this release, Waking on a Pretty Days, was 11 tracks, 69 minutes, but Mr. Vile put out a deluxe version of it 6 months later. And I try to keep my rigid definition of album to what the initial work looked like, but in this instance, I can't help myself. So, the deluxe version is the original version, plus an EP called It's a Big World Out There, and I'm Scared. And folks, it is not to be overlooked. Well, at least one of its tunes isn't. Anyway, shouts out to Chuck Klosterman. I'm hearkened back to episode number 14 with my guy, Ethan Brown, when he told me that Hailu Mergia's Tezeta was his ground zero, his zero pH, his centering record, however it was that he phrased it. And the deluxe version of Waking on a Pretty Days is kind of that for me. I say kind of because I don't love every track, never have. In fact, I seldom listen to the whole thing through. Mostly I'm just jumping to my favorites, but I still love the album the way it is. It's what I go to when I'm feeling blue and lost and driving and I can't figure out what's wrong with me and I feel stupid because I'm wasting valuable time not listening to music, and I feel a pretty rad connection with some of Kurt Vile's music. I hope to one day know his library better, and I hope to see him again live. Catching him at Liberty Hall in Lawrence in October 2022 remains one of the best shows I've seen to date. Surreal and magical. There are some tracks on this record that really just hit it out of the park. I love this record. I love Kurt Vile. It's such a great record. But those are the 5 I selected from my list of nearly 30, so I suppose I could do at least 4 more of these, where I'm just boringly talking to you and reading my notes and showing you album cover art. What would be way cooler than that, though, is guests. So, badassrecordspodcast@gmail.com is how to reach me. That's it for today. I appreciate you if you stuck through it till the end. I wish everyone health, happiness, and good neighbors. Cheers.